Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the very first edition of the Independent Thinker podcast. I am Donald Broussard, and I'm going to get directly into it. I think one of the main things I was mostly concerned about in regards of Independent Thinker podcast, in regards of the perspective of politics and education, concerned about in I was mostly worried, excuse me, I was mostly worried about, do we have an apparatus that will provide individuals um, the ability to talk about politics and education in a way that is intelligent, meaningful, and as non-biased as possible. Um, Allow me to say this: I am um, a registered independent. I do lean more so on the Democratic side. Um, but I try to look at things in perspective and see what would be the best opportunities for my people, specifically African Americans, going into minorities of Hispanic background, Asian American background, um, indigenous people, and so on and so forth. But it is extremely important to really dig deep and to to um, be able to provide evidence and information accordingly. Today's a, I want to say, a huge day in politics. Today is an interesting day because today really gets into the concept of caucuses, specifically the Republican caucuses, which is happening in the next 28 minutes in Iowa. Now, a couple of factors come into play in regards of the caucuses. Number one, it is important to know that it is freezing cold in Iowa. In many parts of Iowa, it is literally negative degrees. In the northwest portion of Iowa, um, very evangelical, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's about -4, -5 degrees. Last time I checked, and kind of look at the weather report over here. It's going to be considered the coldest um, um, date in the history of Iowa, if not mistaken, in regard to caucuses. Excuse me. So we might get low numbers, but um, it is going to be very important to kind of see how things go um, in regard for this, because I do believe, while I believe personally the end result is inevitable, the real race comes in regards of who's second. Um, will it be Nikki Haley? Will it be um, Ron DeSantis? Um, that's the real race, and we'll get into that a little bit and who they are, who's left. I think you might be a little surprised as to who else is left in the Republican race, especially if you haven't been watching it as much. Um, so let's kind of dig into it. Um, Anyone who knows me knows I have this particular feeling about the front runner of the Republican Party. And in this particular instance, I'm going to say his name, even though I'm not a fan to say his name. Um, so let's get into it. It is inevitable that the winner of the Iowa caucuses will more than likely be um, Donald Trump. More than likely, it will be him. And I, I'm not the fan of his, to be honest with you. for obvious reasons. I think his rhetoric is divisive. I believe that his policies are diametrically opposed to the policies that would benefit and help specifically African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, um, indigenous people, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a fait accompli that he is going to win this Iowa caucus. He has a fervent um, um, fan base, I guess you would call it that, who will go out and vote for him no matter what. Um, so that needs to be said up front. Okay. Number two, the real race, as I said earlier, really takes shape with um, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Um, so recently, polls have come out that shows that Nikki Haley is surging a bit. And let me kind of show it to you what I mean. Um, you clearly see here from 538, which by the way is a reputable source. Um, I tell my debate students and even other students who I consult with, it's all about your references. So 538 is your best. It's non-biased and very honest. These are the polls that have come out literally just recently within the last 48 hours. You clearly see number one that Trump is clearly ahead in regards of Republicans who are going to caucus um, today specifically. He's far and away in the lead, and again, far and away will win. But if you noticed in the blue green area here, the increase in Haley moving from obscurity to a certain extent, obscurity, um, to a bit ahead of Ron DeSantis. Matter of fact, about 3% ahead of Ron DeSantis as it relates to the caucuses and who's going to caucus per se. DeSantis is right behind, but and you clearly see way below here is Vivek Ramaswamy, and believe it or not, Asa Hutchinson. Um, I appreciate his vigor, but we kind of know what's happening when it comes to Asa Hutchinson. His policies are atrocious, and that's a different time and different discussion, and we'll get into that probably down the road in regards of policies. But here is the main gist of it. Nikki Haley needs to win, at least second place. I'm sorry, needs to be second, and here's why. The momentum that she has to capitalize in regards of the voters in Iowa. Now you might say to yourself, "What you mean momentum? Did you hear what she said about slavery?" Yeah, I know. Um, here's why I said that she has momentum. Number one, she's getting an even more of an influx of money coming in from the Koch brothers foundation and organization, even though one of the Koch brothers passed away, I want to say about 5 years ago. Um, but the foundation has put in significant amounts of money. A good portion of the money that was originally going to um, Senator Tim Scott, even though he dropped out a couple months ago, has been shifted to Nikki Haley. So she has, quote unquote, the wind behind her, pushing her, even though she provides these ridiculous gaffes on a regular basis. But she needs to capitalize on that. And on top of that, of capitalizing on the momentum, Ron DeSantis isn't helping himself either, right? Um, Ron DeSantis is doing everything he can to try to get eyeballs on him in the worst possible way. Um, he is learning quickly that his so-called policies in Florida um, actually is harmful to America and even in his own state. He is trying to debate or try to debate Gavin Newsom, of all people, who isn't running for the presidency, and literally got wiped, just lambasted for 2 hours. Um, it's weird. He's 40 points behind, and he stops what he's supposedly doing or not doing to debate a Democrat, a very popular Democrat, by the way, in California, who literally just destroyed him from beginning to end, even though Sean Hannity was trying to help him along the way, which says a lot about him. He's very awkward. He smiles as if he's constipated for some reason. It's weird. He's just a weird candidate. And I think people are starting to realize that he is not ready for prime time and is propelling Nikki Haley. Um, you clearly see on this particular chart here, you see Ramaswamy really started to dip significantly after the second debate for good reason. Um, I don't like talking about people all that much, but indulge me for a second. Vivek Ramaswamy is probably, I would believe, a very smart, intellectually stimulating individual. But he is more than likely the slimiest, grittiest, untrustworthy individual. And he really showed it during the third debate, going after Nikki Haley's daughter and everybody on the stage at that time. And you start to see a quick decline. It is safe to say that Vivek Ramaswamy is trying to do everything in his power not to be president. Let me repeat. I truly believe in my heart of hearts he is doing everything he can to not be president of the United States. I truly believe he is trying. Let me stop sharing here. I truly believe he is trying his best to work with um, Donald Trump to be the vice presidential candidate. I truly believe it. So he's not significant. He's not real. He is. Um, I believe he is going to drop out soon rather than later. And of course, you have Asa Hutchinson. He does have some people on the ground in Iowa. Not a lot, of course, because he has been on the camp on the stage since the first debate, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so that's that. So you have five individuals. One person is the presumptive winner, no matter what. You're going to have a two-person race for second place. Very distant third. I mean, me, in my personal opinion, is Vivek Hutchinson. Um, so those are the candidates specifically for Republicans. Now, some of you who might be watching this for the first time might be asking, why is only Republicans, not Democrats? We all know who's the incumbent is our current president, Joe Biden. There are two other individuals that are running for the Democratic ticket, which we'll talk more about that in third party next week. But the two individuals that are running up against President Joe Biden in the Democratic race are Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips. And we'll get into those two individuals next week on the podcast, as well as the third party candidates, the three quote unquote major third party candidates, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Um, I'll leave my comments about him later on. Jill Stein, and an individual who I admire from afar. Um, I personally believe the great Dr. Cornel West. But we'll get into those individuals in the Democratic ticket next week in particular. It is important to understand that how the caucuses work to kind of get a feel for it. So the caucuses are basically like um visual voting apparatus of individuals being, I guess, lobbied and asking for their vote in a public manner, and they vote for their particular candidate in stages. They have to have a plurality, kind of get a little fuzzy here and there. Um, but those results are documented, sent up to the state, um, the Secretary of State, excuse me, for that particular state, Iowa. It is calculated accordingly, and just like any election, they or we as the public will know who won the state in a district by district fashion. Um, the many of the candidates on ground operatives are at each precinct accordingly, and they do everything they can to lobby and get them to vote for their particular candidate and so on and so forth. It's kind of a whirlwind type of voting perspective. It's interesting. Um, but I believe that you're going to see some people really switch over very quickly if you're taking advantage of the opportunity to watch some of the voting, whether you're watching on CNN or on PBS, um, NBC, Fox, or so on and so forth. I think you'll see um, how it really works. But again, I truly believe that, again, Donald Trump is going to win. He's going to win handily, and um, and then you're going to have that two-person race for second place with Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. So there are a couple of districts within Iowa that's pretty interesting. A couple of districts, specifically in the northwest area of Iowa. I think is it Sioux Falls? I can't remember exactly which district directly it is. Trying to pull it up if I can find it for you all. But I say that in the northwest region of Iowa for a couple of reasons. Number one, um, that particular region of Iowa, like I'm sorry, Lyon County, Osceola, O'Brien, specifically Sioux County. And while I'm doing this, I might as well go ahead and show it to you. Um, a couple of districts within Iowa, it's very evangelical, right? Um, Lyon, Osceola, O'Brien, specifically Sioux, Plymouth, Cherokee, Clay, Dickinson are really, really rich in regards of evangelical voting. And here's why this is important. And for you to keep an eye on these specific districts on the far northwest area. Over the past, I want to say, I think 4 Iowa caucuses, those 6 districts within Iowa, specifically Sioux, has benefited the eventual winner of the Iowa caucuses. Let me explain what I mean to you. In 2016, when Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucuses, Ted Cruz was propelled within these districts here, particularly in Sioux. They are extreme evangelicals in the area. They vote um, as if their life truly depends on it, um, and they care. And if I'm not mistaken, kind of look at my notes here. In 2016, um, Trump received 11% within Sioux County. So 11%, 11.4% to be exact. But, but Ted Cruz um, received about a little bit over 40%, literally over 40%. Close behind of him was Marco Rubio. That propelled Ted Cruz to go into New Hampshire, excuse me, then South Carolina and Las Vegas, and then move into Super Tuesday. Um, so it's going to be extremely important if you like politics, if you care about this stuff like I do, and a lot of other political nerds out there. Hello, political nerds. Um, if you really like politics and you want to watch what happens, really hone in on these couple counties here. Um, I know CNN and MSNBC and Fox News are really going to hone in on that. PBS News will do the same as well. So please watch it because this is where the quote unquote rubber hits the road. If Trump does not do well in those counties, in those particular districts, at least as well as he believes he should, those votes based upon research, polling, focus groups have been stated they will go to Nikki Haley. If you notice, they're not going to jump to Ron DeSantis. They're not going to go to Asa Hutchinson. They're not going to go to Vivek Ramaswamy. They're going directly to Nikki Haley. On top of that, within Iowa, if you go to 538, as well as you go to think PBS, um, Wall Street Journal, they also show that the favorability rate for Nikki Haley within um, Iowa is greater than Donald Trump. That's important because after the first round of voting happens, and let's say Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis, those three reach the forgot what it was called indirect. I want to say the vulnerability rate. Basically, you got to reach a particular level to move on to the second stage of voting. Let's say that happens. Vivek Ramaswamy team is probably going to be gone. They're going to try to, have some reconnaissance to try to rebuild themselves and get ready for New Hampshire. In many areas, those voters who voted for Vivek and the handful who would vote for Asa Hutchinson, those those votes will go straight to Nikki Haley. Number one, maybe some of Vivek will move to Ron DeSantis, or Donald Trump, but mostly will go to Nikki Haley. However, Nikki Haley's crew um, will continue to reach out to Donald Trump's voters to find a way to move them over from Donald Trump into their camp, into their voting regime, their area. Once they do that in the second round of the threshold, that can really lead into something even more significant, which will allow Nikki Haley to kind of move up a bit. This is what I believe the strategy comes to be for Nikki Haley. First round, she's happy with being second in many of these districts. But if she is first in those 4 to 8 critical evangelical rich districts in Iowa, you're going to see a huge push for the Nikki Haley crew to fandangle, um, move, if you will, these voters over to her even more so from those who do not reach um, the threshold, and on top of the concept of Donald Trump's um, fan base of voters within Iowa. And that can propel her from moving from a distant second overall to a close second. And if that happens, three things are going to happen if this particular situation happens. So bear with me on this concept. By the way, caucus is starting in 5 minutes. All right, cool. So here's the three things that are going to happen if the scenario I'm envisioning and telling you does happen. First, you're gonna get an influx of money for Nikki Haley across the board. Across the board. Number two, you're going to get individuals within the Republican Party are going to start to endorse her. I'm not saying a Tim Scott. I'm not saying a Chris Christie, especially if you heard what he said on a hot mic last week. I don't believe you're going to get can't believe I want to say his name. Doug Burgum. You might be asking, who is Doug Burgum? North Dakota governor. He dropped out a while ago. We'll talk about him later on. But you might start to get some rumbles um, from a Mike Pence. Um, you might get a few rumbles from individuals within Congress, both in the House and the Senate. So that's number two. Number three, I believe that Donald Trump is going to get on that stage and actually, quote unquote, debate, depending on how close Iowa is. That's going to be interesting. If Donald Trump sees a specific threat with Nikki Haley, he's going all in. And repeat, he is going all in to attack her. That is going to be wild because now what all of these Republican candidates who were on stage the last few times to debate, they, or at least now who is going to be available to debate, will now be able to start punching up instead of punching down upon each other. And that is all they need. Um, Now, I truly believe that Donald Trump will be the presumptive nominee and represent the Republican Party. But if you make this interesting tonight, the strategy for Donald Trump will have to be changed, will have to alter. And this is why the caucuses are extremely important, especially for the Republican Party. And that's going to be extremely, extremely interesting to see in the coming days and weeks of the race for the Republican ticket for president of the United States. So, um, with that being said, I know I said quite a bit so far on this particular podcast. Um, Hopefully, I kind of broke down a little bit about the candidates, who they are, who's running, strategy, the main players, um, and the importance of this. And let me go a little bit further with the importance of this particular caucus, even though it's a fait accompli who wins. Every single network that's carrying the Iowa caucuses, um, or predicting Donald Trump will win. But how long? How large will this win actually be overall? Is the main issue, the main concept here, and that's going to be the main race people are looking at. Um, so right now it's starting at stake right now. 40 delegates are at stake right now. And in every single, I'm looking at CNN, MSNBC, I'm looking at PBS NewsHour. They're saying right now the Iowa caucuses is quote unquote too early to call, with the 45th president of the United States leading in significant margins, at least for now. So that's something that I talked about was going to happen. I kind of knew that was going to happen. We all kind of knew that was going to happen. But we are trying to figure out who will be second. Um, it looks like um, a recent poll that's coming up. I'm looking at it now on television. That the Iowa GOP caucus interest polls coming in. Number one, important issues: immigration 40%, economy 35%, abortion 11%, foreign policy 11% are the top issues for Iowa GOP caucus interest polls. The candidate quality mattered the most. 40% say they must share my values. 34% fights for people like me, whatever that actually means. Um, so that's that. Federal law banning abortions nationwide. 58% of Iowa caucus goers are in favor of a full ban. 36% opposes that. Now, keep in mind, about 4 years ago, that 36% um, was significantly lower. So there has been some type of movement in regards of the abortion situation overall. Um, Iowa caucus goers also stating that, are they part of the quote unquote MAGA movement? 49% say they are, 46% say they yes, they're not. Um, Here's a main poll here that's very important. If Trump is convicted, is he fit to be president? 64% say yes, he's still fit to be president, while 31% say no. Um, I'm gonna get to that in a second. But Iowa caucus entrance poll says time of decision in regards to who they're gonna vote for. 5% said they chose just today. 11% in the last week or few days. 14% in the last month. And over 50% said they knew quite some time ago. Let me go back to this particular poll that came in regards of the viability of um, Donald Trump um, and his fit to be president if if he is convicted of a felony. Now, I want to be clear: this isn't a poll that specifically um, tells the whole story of the entire country. Um, I want to be clear on that. This poll specifically talks specifically about Iowa and the Iowa caucus goers in particular. It says a lot that, at least in the state of Iowa, that if an individual is convicted of a felony, doesn't matter if what that felony happens to be, that voters in a particular state, and focusing on Iowa, believe that Donald Trump is fit to be president, even if he commits convicted of a felony crime. He should not only be president, but he is fit to be president of the United States. So here's my perspective of these Iowa caucus goers for the GOP. This shows a significant hypocrisy in the thought process of those GOP caucus goers who believe that Trump is fit, would be fit, and would be good to be president if he is convicted of a felony. If an individual commits a felony against them, those particular individuals who stated that 45 or President Trump would still be president, would still be fit to be president, the former president that is, would be fit to be president even if he convicted a felony. Um, that those particular individuals would want justice and would want that particular person who committed a felony against them to be tried and convicted of the crime in which he or she or that person committed. This is the epitome of a cult. Look, you don't have to like what I just said, and that's perfectly fine. I respect you no matter what. It is important to understand that that's what this is. Like, legitimately, it really is that. Like, why would anyone in their right mind would say, yeah, I'm going to vote for this convicted felon over here to be president of the United States? But if that particular, if an individual X commits a felony against me or my family, I want that person to be tried to the utmost extent of the law, but not this guy over here who I love and adore to be president of the United States. It's just weird. And but this is where we at right now. This is where we are in regards of politics. So these entrance polls I find to be intriguing because you get a pulse of the community that's voting, and that needs to be understood when it comes to the caucuses and so on and so forth. So the last thing I want to say is this before I leave with this. Next Monday, I'll be talking about what happened during the Iowa caucuses, and then talking about the Democrats that are opposing our current incumbent President Joe Biden, as well as the third party candidates that are running against him. But if you really want to see how, excuse me, the caucuses work, PBS is a great place to go to actually see an actual caucus happening. MSNBC will be showing an example of a caucus in a few. So will Fox News, if I'm not mistaken. I'm kind of looking at on my iPad over here. So all these going to show how a caucus really looks, specifically the second round of voting really looks overall. I think that's going to be super important to kind of get a grasp on it for everyone to kind of see. So please do that in regards. Oh, last thing in regards of entrance polls. Um, Trump is winning white evangelical or born again Christians 55%, DeSantis 24, right, at least for right now, and Nikki Haley with 15% of quote unquote white evangelists, born again Christians themselves. Continue on with other exit polls for in regards of no college degrees, specifically in Iowa. 65% of individuals who do not have a college degree are either planning to vote or leaning towards Trump. 17 to DeSantis, 9% Ramaswamy, 8% to Nikki Haley. So I think you you kind of starting to see a bit of where this voting is leading into. Um, and that's super important. Again, candidate quality mattered the most. 40% is about sharing their ideals. At the very end of this poll is 11% who can actually defeat Joe Biden. So they're trying to look for someone who proclaimed to be for them, right? Outside of anything else, not really about the issues or so on and so forth. It's about them, and their ideals and perspectives, and that's who they want to represent themselves for the presidency of the United States, specifically, again, in the state of Iowa in particular, right? So please take the time to watch the caucuses at least for a little bit. Doesn't matter which um, apparatus you utilize or station use, CNN, PBS, MSNBC, CBS, ABC News, Fox News. Um, I will say that even though as I say my podcast is the independent thinker, I will implore you, absolutely implore you, beg of you, not to watch Newsmax and OAN. I beg of you. um, but please watch and please be able to um, pay attention to Iowa, at least for the Republican race, because second and third place, you're going to see a momentum boost possibly, and next coming upcoming days are going to be very critical. So the fight for these 40 delegate delegate votes are critical, and um, it really depends on what's going to happen, right? And the effect that the whoever is second place will propel them if at all possible. It looks as if I'm looking at both my screens right now. Nikki Haley is speaking in Des Moines, Iowa. Ramaswamy is right now is speaking. It's not saying exactly where he's going to be speaking at. Um, in Iowa as well. It looks like he's going to be probably in Sioux County. It looks like, and um, as well as DeSantis is kind of crisscrossing a bit for what is being said here on online. So please take the time to um, watch a little bit of it and to know what's at stake for the Republican Party as well as for the election itself, whether you're a Republican or not. Um, so and then and then kind of comment on that. So with that comment on here on my YouTube page about this podcast, if you enjoy it, what else you want to know and hear from me, um, stay tuned for next week on the Independent Thinker podcast. We're going to go over the Democrats as well as the third party candidates for president of the United States. We're going to give you a preview of the voting on that will be happen the next day within the Democratic race. It's going to be happening on the very next day. So we're going to have that information, which is going to be the New Hampshire primary, um, and then kind of preview South Carolina primary a little bit as well. So we're going to have a little bit of that going to happen, and go from there. So thank you, for those who are watching, even those who are going to watch later on, for the first episode of the Independent Thinker podcast with myself, Donald H. Broussard Jr. Hopefully, you learned quite a bit. You enjoyed it, and I provide you with some details and information from an independent voter point of view. And I look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care. God bless.